was told attracted a kind of a Levantine congregation, Moroccan Jews and Jews from Tunisia and Yemen and Syria. And I thought, maybe I'll feel comfortable there, and it would be the sort of place my dad would have liked. And sure enough, after services, this elderly old woman came over to me, and she told me she was from Cairo, and she had known my father as a young girl. Her mother, and they resided in the same neighborhood, and her mother ran a nightly poker game, and my father could be counted on to come every single night. And she remembered sitting in the balcony and watching him approach. And this is what she remembered, that number one, he was very tall, sort of a military bearing. His nickname was the captain. And secondly, that he always wore white, that he wore white sharkskin suits. And I remember, this was very, sort of quite literally a dark time for me, so I remember being very, very struck by that image. And in the beginning, and she and I became friends, and in the beginning, all I wanted to know were descriptions of my father in white sharkskin. So that, years before I wrote this book, I wanted to know about, the cut of his jacket, what kind of shirt you wear with a white sharkskin suit, what kind of tie, what kind of shoes, and by the way, for those of you who may not know this little detail, it's two-tone, and I know this because last summer some people in the Hamptons threw a party for me, and the men wore two-tone shoes that they got off of eBay. So, and ultimately the conversation expanded to the world where men wore white sharkskin, this sort of old Cairo, which was this very kind of worldly, and I think fairly tolerant society, of which so little exists. Now, when I came to write this book, I faced an immediate and I think significant challenge. I'm an investigative reporter. We have very exacting standards at the Journal, as you do at the Times, and even at the New Journal of Rupert Murdoch, we have very exacting standards, and we're supposed to have double check, quadruple check any assertion we make. We're supposed to have documents and multiple sources. So how do you maintain these standards when you're essentially embarking on a memoir of your own family, and when you're in effect investigating your own father, including rumors of mistresses, the whole 9 yards? To this day, I don't have a perfect answer. I did as much of what I was trained to do as I could for this book. I obtained every single file from my family that I could think of, our immigration files, HIAS, the Hebrew Immigrant Society in Guyana, the New York Association for New Americans. I even went to Paris and got the year of files for when we were refugees in Paris. But then at the end of the day, I realized that there were still gaps, and the only way that I could tell this story, which is fundamentally about exile and loss, was through the eyes and in the voice of a child, of a little girl named Lulu. And Lulu is, of course, me, but she's not me, because I've sort of come to believe that she's almost developed a separate persona in the course of this book, so that as I stand here, I can almost see her also standing over there, sort of watching and observing. Now, Lulu doesn't understand the events that are, convulsing the Middle East and changing it in ways that I believe we still continue to feel today. She doesn't understand that she feels it. She simply feels it in her own terms. For example, her parents are always mourning the loss of King Farouk, who they saw as their protector. I'm sure, as Americans, we've all been sort of brought up in school and whatever to think of Farouk as this sort of corrupt, rotund dictator, and he was. But he was also the protector of this way of life that I described to you. Lulu has no sense of Farouk. He's gone before she's born. So for Lulu, her protector, her most important person, or non-person really, is her pap, Fusfus. So he's a major character or a significant character in this book. Again, her parents are anguished over the rise of the Nasser regime, which they see as this very, very tough sort of dictatorial reign. Again, Lulu has no sense of Nasser, so what her anguish is very different. She will mourn, for example, and I guess almost above all, the following. She's used to going with her dad to this lovely, magical patisserie, which anyone who's been in the Middle East has heard about, I think, called grappies, which makes kind of European-style pastry. And she sits in the back in a garden and spoons out the specialty of the house, freshly made chantilly cream. So the loss of grappies for her is major and traumatic. She's upset because she has to leave her school, the Lycée Français de Babalu, where she goes and she wears this marvelous, gray uniform with a crest. She's used to going with her dad to the bar of the Nile Hilton, and again, she'll always miss that. And finally, she will miss her home on Queen Nasli Street, which actually is now been renamed, like they've renamed so many streets in Cairo. It's been renamed Ramses Street, but I always call it Queen Nasli Street because that's how I know it, and I think that's actually a nicer name. And she sits with her father on the balcony, and she watches this sort of distinctly Middle Eastern street scene. It's very convivial, very friendly, and people stay on their balconies a lot. And she watches, the passing cars, the pretty girls who come in, their father sort of flirts with them. And above all, the vendors who come, with different wares on their heads. And sometimes they're selling, fresh figs, and sometimes they're selling grape leaves and or fish. And sometimes, not very often, they're selling, rose petals to make rose petal jam. Confiture de rose, and the memory of the rose petal vendors will haunt Lulu wherever she goes, including the offices of the Wall Street Journal. So I finally I'm going to read you just a little bit. The book opens with a courtship, and why, you may ask. I have a wonderful agent who's neither Egyptian nor Jewish nor from New York. He's actually from Omaha, Nebraska, and he said, "Why not, Lucette? Everybody loves a nice courtship." And it takes place during the war, during World War II, and you have to picture this. It's in a cafe called La Parisiana, which is very emblematic of that world that once was. It's a Parisian, and it's owned by a Greek, and it serves, Egyptian meze or appetizers. And you have to imagine Leon, this very distinguished guy dressed in white, sitting there, and he's sort of looking across the cafe to the other side to this lovely young woman named Edith, who is with her mother, and she's sipping Turkish coffee now. Leon is in his early 40s, whereas Edith is 20. She's shy, and she's a teacher, a librarian. She's very bookish. And Leon has never read a book. So I'll just read you a little bit from the courtship, and then I'll take questions. So here's Leon for you. Cairo had a million diversions, and Leon took advantage of every one of them. He relished being single, venturing out every night and not returning until dawn. He ambled elegantly through the city in constant search of entertainment, dining, dancing, and gambling were